Welcome back, Daisy Cakes! Today, I want to talk about Venus plus X by Theodore Sturgeon. Why? Because I am Daisy Ex Machina, the drag queen detective who investigates all things speculative in science fiction, fantasy, and horror. I chose Venus plus X from the 1961 Hugo nominees as part of a series where I pick books to read from the Hugo Awards in order to find authors or books that I haven't heard of before. I chose this one because I was rather surprised. This was a book about a non-binary society written in 1961. But first, who was this writer? Theodore Sturgeon. Theodore Sturgeon was born in 1918 and died in 1985 at the age of 67. His mother was Christine Hamilton Decker Waldo Sturgeon, who was a writer who used the pen name Felix Sturgeon. His stepfather, whom he took his last name, was William Sturgeon, who seems a piece of work because he did not allow his son Theodore to go to college. His brother, Peter Sturgeon, founded the American branch of Mensa. Sturgeon had a series of rather eclectic jobs as a young man after abandoning his dream of being a circus performer. He was a sailor in the Merchant Marines, sold refrigerators door to door, managed a hotel in Jamaica, was a bulldozer operator, and eventually became an advertising copywriter in 1944. He died of lung fibrosis, which may have been caused by asbestos exposure back when he was in the Merchant Marines. His first published science fiction story was in 1938, and he became very prolific during the 40s and 50s, but almost all of his work published is short fiction, short stories, and the occasional novella. He wrote very few full-length novels in his lifetime. He was very well known in science fiction circles. I'd be surprised if you hadn't at least heard of Theodore Sturgeon. He was famously parodied by none other than Kurt Vonnegut as Vonnegut's fictional science fiction hack, Kilgore Trout. Sturgeon. Anyway, there is also Sturgeon's Law. Is it just me, or do a lot of science fiction writers have laws? Sturgeon's Law is 90% of everything is crap. It more specifically focuses on science fiction, i.e., 90% of all science fiction is crap. It comes from an article he wrote acknowledging that there was a lot of crappy science fiction out there. Like 90% of it, but 90% of everything is crap. And the corollary is that the best science fiction is just as good as the best fiction in any other field. And this was back when science fiction was really stigmatized as being non-serious. So anyway, I can't argue that 90% of everything is crap. Theodore Sturgeon wrote for Star Trek, including one of the most highly regarded episodes, Amok Time, in which we learn that Spock is engaged and we learn more about Vulcan culture. Sturgeon was also a big proponent of Scientology from its early days. I think it's kind of interesting that the editor John Campbell, who was a huge fan of psychic powers, influenced a lot of science fiction during the 50s and maybe inspired science fiction writer L. Ron Hubbard to develop Dianetics, which is what Scientology is, of course, based on, and I'm sure it attracted a lot of science fiction writers like Theodore Sturgeon in the 50s. It's something to think about. Theodore Sturgeon was one of the first science fiction writers to write about gays. He himself had gay experiences, and according to his friend and fellow writer Samuel R. Delany, he was bisexual. Certainly he was married to and had relationships with many women throughout his life, but talking about the gays, he published the first pro-gay science fiction stories, The World Well Lost, in 1953. Apparently, the first editor he sent it to, who saw this short story, was so offended by the pro-homosexuality of it all that he called editors at other magazines to warn them about Theodore Sturgeon. But fortunately, another editor ignored the warning and published it. So this brings us to Venus Plus X by Theodore Sturgeon. I picked it because I couldn't believe it was about this non-binary, ambisexual, androgynous society written in 1961. This is 8 years before Left-Handed Darkness by Ursula K. Le Guin, and almost 15 years before The Female Man by Joanna Russ, which are the two early science fiction speculative books that I think of as dealing with radical gender ideologies. By the way, I got the physical copy of the book because it was cheaper than the ebook. I really don't get how they price some of these older works, but whatever. This is the UK version, and I love this cover so much. I tried looking up the artist, but they didn't have who the artist was in the copyright section that I could find. It's pretty sparse. Maybe this is just a UK thing that they don't put in who the artist is, at least not back then. I did look. There is this little chop or something with the artist's initials, which looks like PE in the artwork. If anyone knows who this artist is, let me know because I think it's fantastic. The story is about a man named Charlie Johns from the present, or the 1960s, who wakes up in the future. And I found this kind of interesting because I've been doing this Hugo series for a little bit, and there seems to be quite a few stories that deal with modern man somehow going to the future, like Pebble in the Sky by Isaac Asimov, Earth's Last Citadel by Henry Kuttner and C.L. Moore did that, now Venus Plus X. And of course, it's not a new trope. I mean, we can go back to Mark Twain's Connecticut Yankee in King Arthur's Court, although I guess that's traveling to the past. But it is a nice way to show a different time period through the eyes of a modern person. And I just wonder if that type of story was more common in the early days of science fiction than it is now, though we still see it, like Dennis Taylor's Bobiverse books do that. In Venus Plus X, modern man Charlie Johns wakes up in the world of Ladam, where there are no genders. No genders. The more he explores the world, he discovers the people of Ladam are vegetarian, though the vegetables are unique and are as fulfilling as meat, but they are presented or arranged in these beautiful formations of shapes and color. There is this big emphasis on beauty, including what wild, futuristic, non-binary people wear for clothing. Basically, this is a utopia. But why was Charlie Johns brought here? The Ledam people want to know his opinion of their society. I mean, they really want to know what his opinion is. Also note that Ledam is the word model spelled backwards. And even though explicitly they are on Earth, they live underground. Why is that? Now, Sturgeon's writing style here is, I guess we can call it avant-garde. It's very stream of consciousness at the beginning. Thankfully, that doesn't last long because it would have been exhausting. But at the beginning, we get this stream of consciousness opening. And the entire story, the entire novel, is peppered with these jump cuts to a 20th century couple and their neighbors, where they often break or reinforce gender stereotypes. Like at one point, the husband wants to get his 3-year-old daughter swimming trunks that match their son's, but the wife freaks out and insists that the 3-year-old girl needs a top, so gets her a bikini instead, things like that. But then it also shows like the neighbor men gossiping and doing housework. So it's breaking these rules, and it's really effective showing how gender roles are arbitrary and nonsensical, especially when contrasted with the world of Ladam. This is a fascinating novel. There are 2 big plot twists, neither of which I saw coming. The last one occurs in the very last chapter, the last couple pages of the book, and I absolutely hated it. I hated the ending. Hated it. I don't get why Sturgeon decided to end the story like this, but I guess It did make me feel a certain way and certainly made me think a lot of things. However you cut it, this book is way, way, way before its time. It explores concepts of gender and gender roles that weren't really heavily discussed or explored until the 21st century. I just think it's a fascinating read coming from 1961. But what about you? Have you read or do you want to read Venus Plus X by Theodore Sturgeon? Do you have a favorite Sturgeon book or story? Let me know down in the comments. And while you're there, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to my channel. And keep an eye out for my next video where I pick a book to read from the nominees of the 1962 Hugos. Until we meet again, may all the books you read be blessed.